So my name is Laura Muratore, and I'm a third-year graduate student at San Jose State. I'm getting my master's in research and experimental psychology, and I'm finishing up and graduating in spring 2020. And currently, right now, I'm a full-time clinical research coordinator working on PTSD research at the SFVA. A dance major at UC Santa Barbara. I wasn't too interested in academia at the time, but then I started taking some GE courses, and I took a class in psychology and loved it, and eventually switched my major. And I ended up taking a research and experimental design course, which sparked my interest in research. And so I saw a flyer, volunteered in a couple of research labs at UC Santa Barbara, loved it, graduated, left and applied for clinical psychology PhD programs. I actually got in and went to University of North Dakota. So I moved all the way to North Dakota, went there for about a month, and realized really quickly that clinical psychology practice was not for me. So I ended up actually dropping out of the PhD program and coming back to the Bay Area and kind of reevaluating what my interests were. I really enjoyed the research side of my time in the program and my experiences in psychology labs. And so I looked back into master's programs, and I saw the research and experimental design program at San Jose State. I applied, got in, and here I am now. I actually saw a flyer on the wall at Santa Barbara for a research assistant position, just a volunteer position in Dr. Shelley Gable's lab. And so I applied and met with a grad student and started working. I worked there for about a year. I actually worked in another lab as well with Dr. Jonathan Schooler in cognitive psychology. I mostly did RA stuff, so like data coding and response coding, running participants, things like that, literature reviews, recruitment. For PhD programs, they're primarily focused heavily on research. If you're in clinical psychology, another big component of the program would be clinical practice. So it really depends on what your research interests are and your career paths, depending on what you want to do in the future, so what program you choose. So if you're interested in teaching, a PhD program would be great. You can also teach after your master's if you want to teach at a state level or community college and not be a tenured faculty and just do adjunct. But overall, the difference between master's and PhD programs are really what your career goals are and what your interests are and how you want to utilize your higher education. So you have to take that into consideration when you apply to different schools. I found this job through Indeed.com. I just did a quick search for research. I was interested in continuing and applying my research skills, and also getting paid is nice. So my daily job, it looks like a lot of basically I reach out to a lot of participants. We focus on the veteran population, so I speak with a lot of veterans, and I coordinate the study from beginning to end. So I'm in charge of all the regulatory aspects of the study, so gaining institutional review board approval for the study and maintaining that approval, as well as running participants through the entire course of the clinical trial. So through treatment, through pre-treatment assessments to determine eligibility, as well as post-treatment assessments and follow-up appointments. On our first day, well, actually before we even started our master's program, we all gathered for orientation day. And then part of that orientation day involved all of us being in a room with the different faculty members from the psychology department, where everyone just talked about their research and went around the room saying what they were interested in. And after one of the faculty members, Dr. Matthew Capriotti, he talked about his research interests, and they aligned really well with my own. So after my orientation day, I reached out through email, and we just got to talking, and our interests aligned very well. And so we started working together, and I developed a project based on my interests in disordered eating and understanding I'm interested in clinical psychology just in general, but really interested in disordered eating because it's such a pervasive problem in our culture. And so I developed this project based on our mutual interests, and that's what I'll be talking about today. I plan to finish in spring 2020. I've already successfully defended my thesis, and all that's left is to get it in my manuscript into the school, the San Jose State, for publication. And then afterwards, I'm still a bit unsure of what I want to do exactly. I've been toying with the idea of going back for my PhD just because I'm so interested in research and developing my own research studies. And I have so many questions that I still want to answer in my line of research. And so I've been going back and forth whether or not I want to go back for a PhD or continue on working in clinical research, being a clinical research coordinator and manager, and continuing on with clinical research trials. So right now, unsure. So today I'm going to be talking about my master's thesis project, which is an integrative theoretical approach to understanding disordered eating in gender minority adults. My advisor was Dr. Matthew Capriotti. So health disparities exist for gender minority individuals. So gender minority individuals are persons whose current gender identity does not align with the sex that they were assigned at birth. And these persons experience higher rates of mental health problems in comparison to cisgender individuals, so persons whose current gender identity aligns with the sex that they were assigned at birth. Some of these health disparities are suicidal attempt, suicidal ideation, depression, anxiety, body dissatisfaction, and disordered eating. And for my project, I'm focusing on understanding disordered eating experiences among gender minority persons. So currently we have a limited empirical understanding of why this health disparity exists. So we understand that gender minority individuals experience elevated rates of disordered eating in comparison to the general population, but empirical understanding of why is quite limited. Right now, most of our research has been case studies or small scale studies, and all of the research that has been done has focused primarily on thinness-oriented disordered eating. So thinness-oriented disordered eating, this is driven by motivation to obtain a thinner body. It's more aligned with the cisgender women Western ideal. And currently no research has been done to look at muscularity-oriented disordered eating in this population. And so muscularity-oriented disordered eating is driven by a desire to increase your muscularity and to decrease body fat in order to increase your muscle visibility. And this is typically seen in cisgender males. So we have this health disparity, or we know this health disparity exists for gender minorities, but our understanding of why it exists is quite limited. Other researchers have looked at other health disparities, such as suicidal ideation among gender minority individuals. So this group of researchers, Testa and colleagues, they utilized an integrative approach to better understand why gender minority individuals experience high rates of suicidal ideation. So what they did was they integrated a population-specific theoretical model, so a model that's specific to gender minority individuals uniquely, and also a general theoretical model of suicidal ideation, which is a model that posits factors that lead to increased suicidal ideation across all persons. So they integrated these two types of models to better explain suicidal ideation. And what they found was using the minority stress model only, which is the population-specific model, it did explain a portion of variance in suicidal ideation, so 20% of variability was explained. However, when integrating the population-specific and general theoretical models together, a higher proportion of variability was explained. So integrating the two models better explained suicidal ideation in comparison to the minority-specific model. So the current project that I'm talking about today is applying this integrative approach to disordered eating to explain gender minority individuals' experiences with disordered eating. So I chose the gender minority stress and resiliency model as my population-specific model. This model describes increases in negative psychological outcomes as being caused by increases in minority stress. So minority stress are stressors that are unique to gender minority individuals that lead to increases in negative mental health outcomes. So examples of this are being discriminated against because of your gender minority identity. As well, this model talks about resilience factors, so factors that are unique to gender minority persons that promote resiliency and that help mitigate the harmful effects of minority stress. And then my second model that I chose as my general theoretical model is a tripartite influence model of body dissatisfaction and disordered eating. This model describes increases in disordered eating as being caused by society's pressures to have a specific body ideal. So pressures from your friends, from your parents, and from the media to have like either a thin or a more muscular body type, which leads to this internalization of body image standards, leading to increases in body dissatisfaction and subsequently disordered eating. As well, my project, it's novel in that it assesses both thinness-oriented and muscularity-oriented disordered eating behaviors and thoughts in the development of these of this type of disordered eating in this population. The aim of my study was to gain a better empirical understanding of disordered eating among gender minority adults. So I had two hypotheses. The first was relating to gender minority stress model alone. So I hypothesized that gender minority stress and resilience factors taken together would explain a significant amount of variance in thinness-oriented and muscularity-oriented disordered eating. My second hypothesis was related to the integrated model, so integrating both population-specific and general theoretical factors. So I hypothesized that considering factors from gender minority stress and resiliency model, it would result in a higher proportion of explained variance in disordered eating experiences beyond the explanatory power of the tripartite influence model. So to test this, this is my methodology. My design was cross-sectional, so it was a survey-based observational study with a single time point. I provided participants with self-report questionnaires relating to things like their demographics and gender minority stress and resilience model factors and tripartite influence model factors, as well as questionnaires designed to assess their experiences with disordered eating. I recruited my participants online through Qualtrics survey panels. It was a national recruitment, and Qualtrics is a system which matches interested individuals with surveys that are relevant to them. To answer my hypotheses, I used two types of multiple regression. The first was standard multiple regression, where I entered all gender minority stress and resiliency model factors simultaneously into the model at once. And then to test hypothesis 2, I conducted 2 hierarchical multiple regression analyses where I added tripartite influence model factors in step 1, and then added gender minority stressors in step 2, and resilience factors in step 3. So for participants, 105 self-identified gender minority individuals completed the survey. 12 were identified as straight liners, so participants who didn't exhibit variability in their responses. So straight lining produces unreliable results. So 12 were identified as straight liners, and they were excluded from subsequent analysis. This left me with a final sample of 93 gender minority adults, age 18 and older, with a mean age of 34. These individuals had varying gender identities, so we categorized them in 4 different categories. This was based off the US Trans Survey, their methodology of categorizing gender. So trans feminine spectrum individuals, there are 43, trans masculine spectrum individuals, 31 persons identified. 7 individuals identified as gender non-binary, and 12 identified as cross-dresser. And the majority of my sample were white and highly educated, so the majority had a high school degree or higher. So these are my results. So for the gender minority stress and resiliency model alone, my first hypothesis was supported. So these factors taken together as a set, they explained a significant amount of variability in participants' experiences with thinness-oriented and muscularity-oriented disordered eating. So 59% of the variability in participants' responses were explained by the gender minority stress and resiliency model for thinness-oriented disordered eating, and 42% were explained 42% of the variance was explained for muscularity-oriented disordered eating. So this is a large portion of explanatory power just based on this one model. However, as you can see, a lot of variance still remains unexplained. So the integrated model, my second hypothesis was not supported. So adding the gender minority stress and resiliency model factors on top of the tripartite influence model factors, they did not add significant, unique explanatory value. Although the integrated models, they explained a larger amount of variance in comparison to the gender minority stress and resiliency model alone. So the integrative model, it explained 70% of thinness-oriented disordered eating and 72% of muscularity-oriented disordered eating experiences. However, the gender minority stress and resiliency model did not add unique explanatory power. So for the main takeaways, my study found that disordered eating is highly prevalent among GMI, so 41% of my sample was considered at risk for a clinical eating disorder. So this is a large portion of the sample being considered at risk for a clinical mental health disorder. This is higher than previously reported numbers. Testa and colleagues found 22% of their sample to be at risk for a clinical eating disorder. As well, my study found support for gender minority stress model for explaining disordered eating experiences among gender minority individuals. So this model explained a large portion of variability in participants' experiences with this mental health problem. Although the integrated model, so the two models taken together, the population-specific and the general theoretical model, when integrated together, it better explained disordered eating experiences compared to the gender minority stress and resiliency model. This is very similar to Testa and colleagues' findings in suicidal ideation. Though a large majority of the variability was explained by the integrated model, so 70% and 72%. Still, there is some variance left unexplained, which means that there are other factors that need to be taken into consideration to really understand why gender minorities their experiences with disordered eating. So, of course, all studies exhibit limitations. So my study was limited in the fact that it had employed a cross-sectional design. So it was a single time point. It could not determine causality. The two models that I employed in my study, the gender minority stress and resiliency model and the tripartite influence model, these are both causal theories. So interpersonal factors lead to increases in intrapersonal factors, leading to increases in psychological distress or disordered eating. So my study could not adequately assess causality. As well, I employed convenience sampling using Qualtrics survey panels. So my sample was not representative of all gender minority persons. Lastly, I had a very limited sample size, so only 93 gender minority individuals successfully completed my study. So I could not adequately assess gender identity differences. This is really important because each identity experiences different stressors in different ways. So categorizing everyone together, that's not best practices. So future research is needed to really understand differences between the different gender identity categories. And then, as well, there are other future directions where research can go based off my study. So research is needed to look at causality, so employing longitudinal models to assess disordered eating experiences adequately. As well, my study just looked at the combination of these two theoretical models, their factors together. I found that these two models, all the factors taken together can explain a large amount of variance. However, my study did not look at the directionality of associations between these two models. So for example, how do factors from the gender minority stress model specifically interact with factors from the tripartite influence model and how they influence each other? My study did not assess this, so future research is needed there. As well, the integrative approach was successful for explaining disordered eating experiences among gender minorities, as well as previous research found this approach was useful in explaining suicidal ideation. So future research can be done to apply this approach to other gender minority health disparities, such as suicidal attempt, body dissatisfaction, depression, anxiety, other mental health problems, to really garner a better understanding of gender minorities' experiences.
All right, thank you. So that was great. Again, I'll edit out. We restarted. I'll just edit that part out. It'll be.
Thank you.
That's kind of the nice part. That's kind of the nice part of doing the video, right? I can edit out other weird things. That's totally fine. And I think that's it. So you're almost done.
Yeah,
Left.
I got provisional approval already, so there's that, and there are very minor changes I have to make. I just need to make them and submit it, and then I'll be done.
Cool. Well, congratulations. Again, I think I told this to you, we talked before, but I have questions about, social psychology programs, or disordered eating, or, body image stuff. I'm not familiar with that research, that health research, tends to follow the health personality stuff. But I'm happy to talk to you about, those different programs, or help you connect with somebody if you want to.
Thank you so much.
And of course, yeah. So okay. So thank you for your time. Enjoy your Friday and your weekend, and hopefully you have some time to actually enjoy maybe some outside time or something.
I hope so. You as well.
All right. Talk to you later. Bye.
See you later.